we will understand the meaning and characteristic of monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is a market structure which lies in between the perfect competition and monopoly, and thus it has the features or characteristics of both the market structures. The concept of monopolistic competition is more realistic than the perfect competition and monopoly, and we can even relate this type of market structure with the one which is prevailing in our current markets. In this module, we will thus study the model given by Professor E. H. Chamberlin in his book The Theory of Monopolistic Competition in 1933.
After studying this module, you shall be able to know the meaning of monopolistic competition and its characteristics, learn how a monopolistic competitive firm determines its equilibrium in the short run and the long run, learn the concept of economic efficiency under monopolistic competition, learn the concept of excess capacity. By definition, monopolistic competition refers to a market structure in which a large number of sellers sell differentiated products which are close substitutes for one another. Here, a close substitute is one where cross elasticity is close to unity or greater. Monopolistic competition combines the basic elements of both perfect competition and monopoly. The element of monopoly in monopolistic competition arises from the fact that each firm has an absolute right to produce and sell a branded or patented product. Other firms are prevented by laws from producing and selling a branded product of other firms. This gives a firm monopoly power over production, pricing, and sale of its own branded product. For example, consider the toilet soap industry. There are a number of brand names available in the market. For example, Lux, Lyril, Palmolive, Fairglow, Pierce, Fa, Rexona, Lifebuoy, Carmel, Godrej, Synthol, Ponds, Dove, Dettol, and so on. Each of these branded toilet soaps is produced and sold by a company having monopoly power over the product. Similarly, Maruti Udyog Limited has monopoly power for producing and selling cars under the brand name Maruti. No other car manufacturing company can produce and sell cars under this brand name. So is the case with all other car manufacturing companies. The element of competition comes from the fact that each branded product has several close substitutes, and firms selling branded products of the same generic category have to compete for the market share. Considering again our example of toilet soaps, all the companies producing and selling these branded toilet soaps are in intensive competition for capturing the largest possible market share. One index of the competition between them is the amount that they spend advertising their product. These features of the toilet soap industry make it monopolistically competitive. Toothpaste industry with a number of branded products, names example Binaca, Colgate, Close-Up, Pepsodent, Forhens, Cibaca, Neem, Meswak, Signal, Promise, Prestige, and so on is another example of monopolistic competition. So is the case with major industrial products in India, example electrical tubes and bulbs, TV sets, refrigerators, air conditioners, personal computers, textile goods, tea, coffee, cigarettes, soft drinks, cold creams, shampoos, detergents, shaving blades, shaving cream, hair oil, hair dyes, shoes, wristwatches, steel, cement, mobile phones, and so on. Let's now have a look at the characteristics of monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is characterized by the following features: 1. Large number of buyers and sellers. 2. Product differentiation. 3. Freedom of entry and exit. 4. Market power. 5. Non-price competition. 6. Absence of interdependence among firms. 7. Concept of industry under monopolistic competition. In monopolistic competitive market, there exist large number of both the buyers and sellers of the product. This is the same feature as of the perfect competition. However, there is one difference, that competitive firms are very small relative to the size of the market, whereas in monopolistic competition, the firms are not so small in relation to the size of the market. Moving on to the product differentiation, since various firms under monopolistic competition compete with each other, thus they compete by selling differentiated products that are either similar or close substitutes of each other. Hence, the prices of the products are not too much different from each other. Moreover, the cross price elasticity of demand for the products is large but not infinite. Next is the freedom of entry and exit. It is relatively easy for the new firms to enter a monopolistic competition market industry and for the existing firms to leave the industry. If the industry is profitable, new firms will enter the industry, and similarly, any firm can leave the industry if it incurs losses. This feature of free entry and exit is based on the low startup cost and no exit cost. Firms under monopolistic competition face downward sloping demand curve, that is AR, and marginal revenue, that is MR curves lies below it, because the firms sell differentiated products which are and can be close substitutes, and any reduction in the price by the seller would attract the customers of the other product towards it. Therefore, fall in the price of one product will increase the demand of that product. Hence, firms under monopolistic competition have some influence on the price. Moreover, the demand curve is comparatively more elastic in this market structure, but it is not perfectly elastic. Further, we discuss non-price competition. Firms under monopolistic competition compete not only in terms of prices but also on other non-price variables which the firm spends on advertising, like marketing, cost, sales promotion expenses, etc. Absence of interdependence among firms. In monopolistic competition, each firm acts more or less independent and have their own price policies regarding the prices and the output. Hence, the change in the pricing policy of one firm does not have a significant effect on the price and output of the other firm. Next, let us understand the concept of industry under monopolistic competition. Industry is defined as the number of firms selling homogeneous or identical products. However, with product differentiation, the definition of industry becomes ambiguous. Hence, Professor Chamberlin has replaced the concept of industry with the group of firms producing differentiated products which are close substitutes of each other and have high cross price elasticity of demand. The table shows the comparison of features of the monopolistic competition with that of the other market forms, namely perfect competition and monopoly. Both monopolistic competition and perfect competition share a common feature of having large number of firms, free entry and exit, and zero economic profits. The features that monopolistic competition shares with the monopoly includes downward sloping demand curve, supernormal profits in the short run, non-pricing competition, and dead weight loss. Chamberlin has made the following explicit and implicit assumptions to develop his theory of monopolistic competition. First, there are large number of firms selling slightly differentiated products which are close substitutes for one another. Second, the number of firms in a product group is so large that their activities, especially maneuvering of price and output, go unnoticed by the rival firms. Third, demand and cost curves for all the products and for all the firms of the group are uniform. That is, firms face identical demand, including perceived one, and cost curves. Fourth, consumers' preferences are evenly distributed among the different products and product differentiations are not such that they make a difference in cost. Since monopolistically competitive firms have downward sloping demand curve, so they have some market power and can influence the price as each firm sells differentiated product which is not exactly similar to the product of the other firm, but yes, somewhat substitute to the product of the other firms. Moreover, there exist no major barriers to entry or exit in the monopolistic competition, thus, this feature puts a limit on the profits of the firms. Now, because of the free entry, the new firms will keep entering a monopolistic competition market until the economic profits are driven to zero. Let us understand the short run equilibrium with the help of a diagram. In the diagram, output is measured on x-axis and cost is measured on y-axis. Here, AR is the demand curve of the monopolistic competitive firm which is downward sloping because they sell differentiated products. MR is the corresponding marginal revenue curve. MC is the marginal cost curve and AC is the average cost curve of a monopolistic competitive firm. A profit maximizing firm will produce where its MR is equals to MC. In this case, P is greater than AC, so firms earn supernormal profits, as indicated by the rectangle area in the figure. Here, the second order condition is also satisfied at the equilibrium, that is, delta MR by delta Q is less than delta MC by delta Q. The long run conditions differ from the short run conditions because in the long run, first, new firms enter the industry, second, firms indulge in price competition, third, changes 1 and 2 take place simultaneously, and fourth, firms advertise their product more vigorously. When monopolistically competitive firms earn positive or supernormal profits in the short run, then this attracts new firms to enter the market and hence new potential firms start producing their own differentiated product in the market. This reduces the economic profit of the market as the existing firms lose their market share and their demand curve shifts down. This will go on till all the firms earn only normal profits and the economic profits comes to zero. We shall understand the long run equilibrium graphically. In the diagram, we have output on the x-axis and price on the y-axis. In order to maximize profits, firms will produce where MR is equals to MC. Here, one point to note is that the demand curve is tangent to the firm's AC curve, which implies P is equals to AC and economic profits is equals to 0. Hence, we can write the following long-run equilibrium conditions under monopolistic competition. MR is equals to MC, delta MC by delta Q is less than delta MR by delta Q, P is equals to AC. Perfectly competitive firms are economically efficient because they maximize the sum of producer and consumer surplus, whereas monopoly leads to a loss in the social welfare of the society. Let's see here if the monopolistically competitive firms are efficient or not, and how are they compared with the competitive firms. Sources of inefficiencies can be explained with the help of a diagram. There are basically two sources of inefficiencies in monopolistic competitive firms. Under monopolistic competition, equilibrium price exceeds marginal cost, whereas under perfect competition, P is equals to MC. Let us understand this with the help of a diagram. In the figure, we have output on the x-axis and cost and revenue on the y-axis. Since under monopolistic competition, P is greater than MC, this means that value to the consumers of the additional units of output exceeds the cost of producing that output. The sum of consumer and producer surplus can be maximized if the output was expanded up to the point where P is equals to MC by the MKL region in the figure. Hence, MKL region is the dead weight loss under monopolistic competition that arises due to the existence of monopoly power, downward sloping demand curve. Hence, social welfare is not maximized under monopolistic competition. Because of the free entry and exit assumption under perfect competition and monopolistic competition, long-run equilibrium occurs where P is equals to AC, that is, economic profits is equals to 0 in the long run. However, there is one important difference in both types of market, that is, in case of a competitive firm, zero profits occurs at the minimum of the average cost curve. However, under monopolistic competition, the zero profits occurs on the falling portion of the average cost curve and not at its minimum. This happens because firms face downward sloping demand curve and therefore the 0 point occurs to the left of the minimum of the average cost curve. Hence, firms under monopolistic competition operate with excess capacity. We shall now understand the concept of excess capacity. Excess capacity is defined as the difference between the ideal output and the actual output attained in the long run, where ideal output is the output which is produced by the firms where the long run average cost is at its minimum. Under monopolistic competition, the firms though earns zero economic profits, but there always exists the problem of excess capacity because the monopolistically competitive firms' output does not coincide with the output at the minimum of LAC curve. We shall now understand the concept of excess capacity under monopolistic competition with the help of a diagram. In the figure, output is measured on the x-axis and cost and revenue is measured on the y-axis. As we can see in figure, a monopolistic firm produces M output which is less than the ideal output N. This difference is termed as excess capacity because each firm is producing its output at an average cost that is higher than it could achieve by producing its capacity output. Excess capacity is a kind of inefficiency of the firms which reduces the social welfare and makes the consumers worse off. Professor Chamberlin's explanation of the theory of excess capacity is different from that of ideal output under perfect competition. Under perfect competition, each firm produces at the minimum on its LAC curve, and its horizontal demand curve is tangent to it at that point. Its output is ideal and there is no excess capacity in the long run. Since under monopolistic competition, the demand curve of the firm is downward sloping due to the product differentiation, the long run equilibrium of the firm is to the left of the minimum point on the LAC curve. According to Chamberlin, so long as there is freedom of entry and price competition in the product group under monopolistic competition, the tangency point between the firm's demand curve and the LAC curve would lead to the ideal output and no excess capacity. When there is no price competition due to the prevalence of these factors, the curve DD is of no significance and the firms are only concerned with the group DD curve. This can be explained with the help of a diagram. In the diagram, we have output on x-axis and price and cost on the y-axis. Suppose the initial short-run equilibrium is at S, where the firms are earning supernormal profits because the price OP corresponding to point S is above the LAC curve. With the entry of new firms in the group, supernormal profits will be competed away. The new firms will divide the market among themselves and the capital DD curve will be pushed to the left as DD1 in figure, where it becomes tangent to the LAC curve at point A1. This point A1 is of stable equilibrium in the absence of price competition for all the firms in the group and they are earning only normal profits. Each firm is producing and selling OQ output at QA is equals to OP price. In Chamberlin's analysis, O1 is the ideal output, but each firm in the group is producing OQ output in the absence of price competition. Thus, OQ1 represents excess capacity under non-price monopolistic competition. The monopolistic competition given by Chamberlin is characteristically closer to the perfect competition. There are, however, significant differences between the two kinds of markets in respect of 1. The number of firms, 2. The nature of product, 3. The nature of competition, 4. Efficiency in production, and 5. Capacity utilization. Let us now understand the first characteristic, number of firms. The number of firms in both monopolistic competition and perfect competition is very large, but the number of firms under perfect competition is much larger than that under monopolistic competition. The number of firms in perfect competition is so large that an individual firm has absolutely no control on the price of its product. Price is determined by the market forces and is given to the firm. However, under monopolistic competition, the number of firms is only so large that an individual firm does have power to change price of its product, especially under the condition of product differentiation. A firm can increase the price of its product and still retain some of its buyers, which are not possible under perfect competition, and if a firm cuts down the price of its product, it captures a part of the market of the rival firms. On the contrary, if a firm in perfect competition cuts down the price, it goes out of the market itself. Moreover, the competitive firms are very small relative to the size of the market, whereas in monopolistic competition, the firms are not so small in relation to the size of the market. Under perfect competition, product is homogeneous and therefore the product of each seller is treated as a perfect substitute for the product of other firms. Under monopolistic competition, on the other hand, there is product differentiation and the product of each firm is a close substitute for that of the others. Next is the nature of competition. Under perfect competition with homogeneity of products, there is practically no competition. Each firm faces a horizontal demand curve and sells any quantity without affecting the market share of other firms. On the other hand, under monopolistic competition, the firms face a downward sloping demand curve due to the product differentiation. Competition between the firms may take the form of price competition or non-price competition, where non-price competition takes the form of competitive advertising of the product by the firms. Moving on to efficiency in production. Efficiency in production under monopolistic competition and perfect competition is compared on the basis of their equilibrium output. Though the rules for profit maximization are the same for the firms in both the kinds of the markets, that is, MR is equals to MC with MC rising, but still the equilibrium output under perfect competition is higher than that under the monopolistic competition. Moreover, the production under perfect competition is more efficient than under the monopolistic competition. Next is capacity utilization. In continuation with the issue of efficiency in production, it has been shown that capacity utilization under monopolistic competition is lower than that under the perfect competition. It means that under monopolistic competition, there is underutilization of capacity, that is, there is excess capacity under the monopolistic competition, whereas there is none under the perfect competition. Chamberlin's theory is criticized on the following grounds. Chamberlin's theory has low predicting power. Chamberlin's model is challenged on the theoretical grounds. Chamberlin's model makes unrealistic assumptions like assuming the identical cost and revenue curves are not justified, assuming no interdependence is not reasonable, assuming that firms do not learn is not correct. The two other points on which Chamberlin's theory was criticized are: Chamberlin's measure of excess capacity is logically inconsistent. Chamberlin's model lacks empirical validity. Despite these damaging criticism, Chamberlin's theory of monopolistic competition is regarded as a significant contribution to the theory of value and remains a subject matter of microeconomics for an analytical rigor and insight that it provides in analyzing a monopolistically competitive market.
Let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. This module has explained the characteristics of monopolistic competition, which is a combination of perfect competition and monopoly. Moreover, the short-run equilibrium of a monopolistically competitive firm shows the same effect as of monopoly, but in the long run it ended up with excess capacity and with zero economic profits. Monopolistic competitive market also has the same inefficiency of deadweight loss as that of monopoly, which arises due to the downward sloping demand curve, that is, which arises due to market power. At the end, we have compared the monopolistic competition market structure with the perfect competition in detail, and we have also pointed out the criticism of the Chamberlin's monopolistic competitive theory of pricing.